My name is Johnperkins. I was an economic hitman. We economic hitmen built a global empire, the first truly global empire in the history of the world. And basically, we cheated countries around the world out of trillions of dollars and funneled the money that was lent to those countries by the World Bank into major U.S. corporations and a few very wealthy families in the third world. At the same time, we put the countries in the third world so deep into debt that they couldn't possibly pay back the debt and owed us favors. So when we needed oil cheap from those countries, or UN votes in our favor, or land for military bases, or wanted them to send troops in support of us to Iraq or someplace else, we went back in and said, look, you borrowed a lot of money from us, you owe us a lot of money, you can't repay us, therefore give us this favor, sell us your oil real cheaply. That's what economic hitmen do. Economic hitmen work in many different ways, but probably the most typical is that we identify a developing country that has a resource that we covet, let's say oil, and we arrange then for one of the major banks or a coalition of them, usually with the World Bank as the lead, to lend that country a lot of money. Most of the money then goes to companies in the United States, ones that we've heard the names of, like the Bechtels and the Halliburtons, to build major infrastructure projects, power plants, harbors, industrial parks that serve the very rich in that developing country. And very little of the money actually finds its way into the country itself. But the country is left holding a huge debt that it can't possibly repay. So at some point we go back into the country and say, look, you owe us all this money, you can't repay your debt, therefore sell our oil companies your oil very cheaply. Even if that means destroying your rainforests and your indigenous cultures, you owe us this debt. Sell us your resource, oil, whatever, at a very cheap price. From my experience, the organizations like the World Bank and the IMF and other major international aid agencies and banking institutions basically serve the interests of building empire. And to a large degree, this empire has been built by the United States, although there's other countries involved. We're kind of like the CEO of the empire. And these organizations, these banks, which were originally set up to reconstruct a devastated world after World War II, very quickly became politicized. And part of reconstructing that devastated world was showing the world that our system was better than the Soviet Union system, that capitalism was better than communism. So almost from the beginning, these banks became politicized. Over time, they very much became the vehicles of American corporations, what I call the corporatocracy, which are really the people who run this empire. These are the heads of our big corporations and our government and our bank, and they often jump back and forth between these very high-level positions in those organizations. And the banks essentially are set up to serve their interests, to help them become more wealthy and more powerful. I think people are drawn into this type of work. A, it's not illegal. It's praised. And B, you get what I think are the three biggest drugs of our culture, which are money, power, and sex. There's a lot of all of those. And in my case, I always got to travel first class and fly in the bump of the 747s and stay in the best hotels and eat in the best restaurants. And I talk in the book a lot about the background I came from that made this appear to me to be to be the realization of a dream that I had had since I was young, to travel around the world living the good life. And so people are drawn in by that, and also by the fact that it's very much sanctioned by our education system and by the things that we're brought up to believe in. And that's so true of many people who work in the corporations. There's a lot of people in corporations like Bechtel and Halliburton and in the World Bank and in Monsanto and Nike that believe, that can convince themselves that they're doing good things because there's a whole apparatus set up to convince them of this. Psychologists, human resource specialists, financial specialists, even lawyers that are there to tell people like me that we're doing the right thing. This is the best thing for the world. This is helping progress. And so it's very, very easy to hide from this. And I think the system, we need to face this system head on, and we need to expose it for what it is. And that's why I wrote the book, so that it makes it much more difficult for people to work for Monsanto or General Electric or Nike or Walmart and go out there and exploit others and convince themselves that they're really doing good. I hope my book will make it more difficult for them. A good example of the way economic hitmen work, I think, is Panama under Omar Torrijos, who was the president that negotiated the Canal Treaty with Jimmy Carter. And I personally went into Panama, and I talk about this in detail in Confessions of an Economic Hitman, but in summary version, Torrijos told me, look, I'm not going to buy the deal that you have. I know what you want to do. I know basically you want to put us in deep debt, and I know that if I go along with this system, I'll become wealthy. But that's not what I want. What I want is for my poor people to be better off. And so, in fact, in that case, we did do some projects in Panama that helped the very poor. We showed that foreign aid can be used in a good way. But I was also very aware that I was failing as an economic hitman. I wasn't bringing Torrijos around. And I was always aware that when we economic hitmen fail, which doesn't happen too often, but when we fail, what we call the jackals, which are CIA-sanctioned assassins who will usually go in and try, first of all, to create a coup in a country, but if that doesn't work, they'll assassinate presidents or heads of state. And in fact, I was aware that I was failing as an economic hitman, that Torrijos was refusing to go along with the system, and therefore he was in for trouble, and in fact he died in a fiery airplane crash that has all the markings of a CIA assassination. Now, when both the economic hitmen and the jackals fail, then and only then, as a last resort, does the U.S. military go in. And that's what happened in Iraq. In Iraq, we tried to emulate the plan that we've been so successful in imposing upon the House of Saud, the royal family of Saudi Arabia. We were very successful with that plan. And so we tried to do the same thing with Saddam Hussein in Iraq, but Saddam didn't go along. The jackals then tried to remove him or assassinate him. They couldn't. His security forces were too loyal, and he had lots of doubles. So we attacked in 1990. And at that point, just basically destroyed his military and thought he was sufficiently chastised that now he would come around. And so we tried all over again. The economic hitman went in again, failed again, he wouldn't come around. The jackals couldn't take him out, so we sent the military in once again, more recently. That's kind of the way this whole system works, is that the empire is built primarily on economic hitmen, but when we don't succeed, the CIA-sanctioned jackals go in. If they don't succeed, then as a last resort, the military.